My goal here is, first of all, my name is Sandy Lee Wong. This is my daughter, Toria Wasick. This is pattern modification and costume design. A little bit about us. I have been sewing, I figured it out, almost 35 years. The first thing I ever made was my prom gown because I was going to learn how to sew or I was going to die trying. And I'm still here. So, I made plenty of mistakes. And thankfully, I had a really wonderful friend who helped guide me through some of those. And we all make those mistakes. Okay, show of hands. How many people here own a sewing machine? All right, woo! How many people have a serger? Okay, awesome. A few less, but that's okay. The first part we're going to cover about some different types of fabrics and sourcing, and a few things about using different materials for different applications, okay? So the different types of fabrics is, a lot of people understand that there are your cottons and your polyesters. There are also your natural materials like your silks and your rayons. I always encourage people to try to use the best quality fabric for whatever project it is that they're doing. And I'm going to pass some of these things around. When I get to the three-dimensional flowers, please don't keep our three-dimensional flowers because they do go on her princess train. But I will show you how we made flowers that actually popped out and were detachable for her princess train. So when we get there, there's that. The very last part of the session, I have enough for 40 kits to show you how to make an applique. So all of these things on here are appliques. The secret that the people from all of the coordination organizations won't necessarily tell you is much of it is glued on. And it's almost all glued on first. And then you go back and you whip stitch it, or you'll bead it. And so that's the secret. So we'll talk about a couple different types of adhesives because there's the ones that people use commonly, and then there's some that I strongly recommend you don't use. Okay? All right. So back to types of fabrics. So there are your satins and your broadcloths. I'm sorry, what?
Polyesters as well.
And your polyesters. There are the super shiny satins, and then there's the more muted ones. Do I have one here? Maybe.
This one's more muted.
That one's more muted. The advantage of a muted satin is that you'll notice under the lights, you don't get a lot of reflection. So if you're making a cosplay that you're going to get a lot of pictures done, or you're going to be under a lot of lights, if perhaps you're going to be in a competition and you don't want that stage lighting bouncing off of you. Now there are some situations where you would want that, but if you don't, then go for a more muted satin. The other thing is, when you're purchasing your satins or whatever fabrics, take a look at the content. If it is 100% polyester, you can wash it. Now this gown has been washed no less than 5 or 10 times. Obviously you don't toss it in the washer, but she was part of Lutheran Coordination. This was from 2011, and they did 15 parades a year. Now she did probably 6 or 7 of those, in that dress, and it would be up to 100 degrees outside. And so we would take it home that night, and we would dunk it in the bathtub with a little bit of Tide and hang it out to dry. And so keep that in mind when you are purchasing your fabrics, that you're going to want something. If it's something that you're going to want to use again and again, think about things that can be washed, and not necessarily in the washing machine. Sourcing. So locally, everybody knows about Hoblob and Joann's. There are many other options, even locally. I am a huge fan of Fabrictopia. Has anybody heard of that? We love Fabrictopia. Fabrictopia is down on Laurel Street. They are a wholesaler and discounter of fabric. So they buy bolts of fabric from places going out of business or overstocks. So it's kind of like going into a Ross's, but it's somewhere between, has anyone from the Houston area around here? Okay, high fashion, but high fashion at Hobby Lobby prices, okay? Houston also has Fabrictopia. Anybody from the Dallas area? Dallas also has Fabrictopia. I didn't need this turn into a Fabrictopia commercial, but I really do like them. Only thing is they close at 4:45 p.m. So you got to get there early, and they are open 7 days a week. But then there's also online sources. I had to make 600 Fiesta sashes one year for a convention, and so I needed, and they didn't want shiny fabric, and they wanted a god-awful poplin. But that's what they wanted, so I had to buy 75 yards of poplin, so I used an online source. When you're doing that, if it's a very specific color you're looking for, get a swatch first. Also, if you're not really sure about the source, if you're not really sure if it's gonna be a thick enough fabric, for example, get a swatch. Most of the time, they'll charge you $1 for it, and it's totally worth it. And does anybody else have any suggestions for places that they like to get fabric from locally? Okay, one other I like is the San Antonio Upholstery Supply. At San Antonio Upholstery Supply, it's down on Mesquite. They have a lot of your drapery and upholstery, which drapery fabric can be used for many, many more things other than drapery, and Scarlett O'Hara will tell you that. They also have something called textiline or vinyl coated mesh. This is an example of textiline, and the advantage of this is if you are doing something that you need to stand up, like a collar or something, it'll give you that structure, but it's not as harsh as like if you were to use sheet metal. No, seriously, this is sheet metal. So this we call a backpack. This backpack goes under this train. So if you have something that needs a lot of structure, like for instance, if you're making a beautiful set of wings, then you might want to do something like this. And quite honestly, this is a piece of sheet metal. It's some quilt batting, and then right down here there's a shoulder pad to give a little bit of extra support and a little bit extra padding right where all of the pressure is going to be on for pulling a train. Everybody asked how heavy the train is. The train, I actually weighed it. It weighs less than we thought it did. It weighs 32 pounds. This one weighs about 8. Yeah. But when you're dragging it, especially on carpet, it feels like it weighs a ton. Okay, so other types of fabric that there are your specialty fabrics. The problem with some of these is in the heat, they'll do exactly that. They'll stick together. So when you're storing something like this, you need to make sure that you're storing it in a temperature-controlled environment. Otherwise, eventually these will start looking really not great. However, they work really fine when you're doing stuff like appliques. There is a difference in quality of fabric. I always recommend people get the best quality, not necessarily the most expensive, but the best quality of fabric that they are for their project. I'm going to pass this around. This is what I call a costume grade quality piece of fabric. If you notice, it's real thin and it's kind of sticky. I guess that's the best way to describe it. Versus this, which I would call a Duchess satin. Difference between a Duchess satin and a bridal satin is Duchess satin isn't quite as shiny. This is a Duchess satin as well. At Joann's, they call this Casa Collection. Well, they've got a lot of things they dump into their Casa Collection now, but this used to be their run-of-the-mill Casa Collection. A bridal satin is going to be thicker. So if you're looking to do a little bit more structure, you're going to want to go with either a Duchess or a bridal satin. If you're looking for less structure, you can go with like a dress satin. Let's see, what do I have here? This is a crepe. Again, that's real shiny. I have a Dapani here. I have a Dapani. Okay, the cool thing about Dapani is you can use either side. If you're looking for that shiny look, you can use this side. Otherwise, you can use the other side, and it kind of looks like raw silk. Again, 100% polyester, completely washable. Hand washable on a lot of these. But a lot of your costuming is probably what you're probably going to want to do hand washing on a lot of it anyway.
What was that called again?
This is Dupani. Silk Dupani, although not necessarily made out of silk. It can be a polyester silk Dupani.
It has the look of silk.
Right. It has the look of silk, is what she said. Okay, so when you're talking about your stretchy fabrics, I strongly recommend a serger, but you don't have to have a serger. There is a little tool that you can attach to your sewing machine that does a zigzag and cuts the edge, similar to what a serger does. The only difference is you might not get quite the same finished edge as a serger does, but look for them on Amazon, and I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically, it turns your sewing machine into a serger. When you're looking at stretchy fabrics, there's two-way stretch and four-way stretch. So two-way stretch, obviously, it stretches just one way, and four-way stretch is like what your swimsuits do. They stretch all directions so that we can get in and out of them. When you are looking at a pattern and it calls for a two-way or a four-way stretch, do not try to use something that's not stretchy. You will not be able to get in and out of it. There's a reason why it's requesting that. But if it doesn't call for a two-way or four-way stretch, and you try to use something that is, then you end up with an issue. Several years ago, I had one thing that you don't want to do when you're picking out whatever fabric it is for whatever your pattern is, you need to think about the fabric before you think about the color. Now, okay, I know I'm in a room full of cosplay people that want things to look a very specific way for a very specific cosplay, but there's a reason for that. I had a young lady a few years ago that was a duchess who her designer was not real familiar with fabrics, and she wanted this purple fabric, and she wanted it for her gown. Well, I'm here to tell you that this purple fabric is panty stretch velvet. Panty stretch velvet is not good for a ball gown because it won't lay right. It'll stretch the wrong ways when you don't want it to. You have no structure to it. So I had to take fusible interfacing, and I had to fusible interface the whole darn dress to a liner in order to make it work. So it can be done. You don't want to do it. You don't want to do it. So, so kind of keep that in mind. There are perfectly good purple velvets that are not panty stretch velvet. So I'm going to pass this around, take a look at that, and you'll see what I mean by trying to make that stabilize. So other things we use other than this vinyl coated mesh is I actually use canvas, like your duck cloth canvas, heavy canvas. And why I do that is sometimes we'll have something like this. This is a fiesta sash. And you want it to handle the weight of the fiesta metals without going like this. Because you'll see people that have just satin ribbons or whatever for fiesta. I'm gonna pass this around and feel the weight of it and feel how, you know, if you put fiesta metals on that, it's not gonna collapse on you. And it's gonna look good for years. I've used this for 2 years now, and I'll use it again next year.
And what was that you put in it?
I put canvas inside that. And the reason I do that was because it gives it enough structure. I'll show you the difference. This is that vinyl coated mesh. So this fiesta sash has that mesh inside it, I think. Yeah, it does. This is a little more stiff. It works. I just like the feel of that better. I think it breathes better. And to me, it's more comfortable. This has this inside. I'm going to pass this around with it. So that has this inside it. But if you're trying to get shoulder pads that do a certain thing, or you're trying to get a front panel that does a certain thing, then I strongly recommend you line it with either a vinyl coated mesh or canvas if you're looking for a softer look. Do you want me to get you out of that train?
I got it.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to pass the backpack around, just so you guys see what the backpack is. Again, this has a piece of aluminum, I think, inside it.
You said the sheet metal.
It is sheet metal. I went to Home Depot and I bought a piece of sheet metal, took some tin snips and cut it down. And in this case, we actually used a Velcro closure to give her. I'm gonna put it on her real quick. Tori, I'm gonna put it on you real quick.
All right.
She's my little Barbie model here. This side.
Got you.
All right. It may not fit her anymore. Oh, it does. So anyway, so that gives that puts then the weight will distribute all the way across the back. And then, poor little thing, she had all that weight on one shoulder that was clipped right here. So this train, I can get this on, has clips in the back.
Do you want me to put it on?
No. You don't want to put it on, I know you don't.
So one of the main issues with this, here, where's the?
Right there in front of you.
One of the main issues with this design is that I could not actually breathe. Whenever I had this train on, I was sitting down
And all
and all of the weight went to my lower back, but it also distributed a lot onto right here. Big problem area is that this is where the diaphragm is. You can't exactly breathe if that cannot expand. So try to make sure to figure out where things are most, sorry, I can't even breathe now. Anyway, try to figure out where the right placement would be for long-term use, because let's face it, we all know that we're going to be wearing our cosplays all day.
Okay, thank you, Freya.
Wow.
Yes, question?
It's 15 minutes since you started.
Thank you. That would be my son. So now you've got the whole family and my daughter-in-law. What?
So let's actually do a little thing. Whenever 15 minutes occurs, just say sparkle.
Sparkle. Oh dear God. Sparkle. Okay. Okay, so, I'm stepping on things. All right, so I want to actually, you talk about that a minute. What? Talk about talk about how to make these, and then I'm going to pull out the.
Okay. Alrighty, so these are our three-dimensional flowers. A lot of what we did was, we kind of experimented. It's one of those things that it's a hit or miss. We tried it with the mesh crinoline. That ended up being way too stiff. They were three-dimensional, however, they didn't look like the product that we need. Which did we use on the inside of this again?
So in these we actually.
We made these in 2012, so these are pretty old.
Okay, so in these, what I'm going to have several of you guys do is we're going to make, since Steven Universe had its new episode come out, or whatever new movie.
Its movie is coming out today.
Okay, Steven Universe's new movie is coming out today. We'll make a Steven Universe star. This right here that some of you will receive is crinoline, and it's like a gauze, but it's more stiff.
Do I pass this way?
So yeah, you can pass them around. And again, please make sure that the flower get back to us. Actually, let's pass down the sash. It's easier.
Yeah.
So on this, you will see, if you look closely, these are double-sided. So when we make the star later, you'll see how we make that. So basically what you would do is then you would do the double side on that and glue fabric on the other side and then whip stitch it. But if you'll notice on each of these, what we did on the rhinestones, we glued them down and then we whip stitched them in place. So, kind of fun, right? All right, you keep going.
And then to actually create the three-dimensional effect, has anybody ever like pinched paper and it kind of makes the paper go from flat to dimensional? That's basically all we did. We I guess in a way you could say it was kind of like origami, but not really. But that's pretty much all there was to it. It's very easy to do. We cut out the pattern of the flower that we wanted it to be, and then we just simply moved the petals to where it was three-dimensional, to the point where we thought it was dimensional enough, and we glued it in place. The center area was basically just a cone, pretty also self-explanatory to do. A lot of times whenever you make fabric stiff, it acts a lot like paper. So if you're able to do it with paper, whenever you achieve the right stiffness with the fabric, you're able to do it with the fabric. And a lot of that is how much crinoline you use. Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so who wants to modify some patterns? Okay, so I'm going to pass around. This is a very simple Halloween costume pattern. Well, one thing I truly appreciate that the pattern companies have responded pretty well to the fact that so many of you guys are, one, bringing back sewing, and two, sewing these amazing costumes. This one is a very generic pilgrim costume, and like a, I don't know, like Southern Belle kind of thing. No, we're not there yet.
I know.
Okay,
We're coming.
so, but when I look at this costume, especially you see, and I'll pass this around, or you can look on your, if you look up on your phone, Simplicity C3723, it should be the same pattern. It's their costume collection that looks like a pilgrim. Anyway, so I look at this and I actually see that we can do a lot of things. C3723. And when I look at something like this, this is your generic basic dress pattern. Find a dress pattern that fits you well, and then take some fusible interfacing and interface the pattern pieces to fusible interfacing so you can use them again and again for your basic bodice, or basic pieces. Or you can spend however much this was, $9, again and again and again. In this particular pattern, I've used it for many things. I see on this pattern that this could be a really great Lolita option, because it's kind of got the V waist, and it gives you a couple different options for these pantaloons on the side, and you could easily shorten it, okay? And it's got a full skirt. You can play mix and match with patterns all day long. When you have a sleeve that you like that's from one pattern, and a bodice or a skirt from another, just make sure you're matching up side seams, front seam, shoulder seam, and here. So in this particular pattern, and I guess I'll still pass it around. This particular pattern, I had a young lady who wanted that centerpiece of it that looks like this, okay? So it's kind of just a panel, right? So the centerpiece looks like that. And sorry, hold the microphone. Well, she wanted it to be, and down it goes. That's okay, thank you. She wanted it pleated. She wanted it to have creases all the way across. So I took that same pattern.
Got it.
You got it? And I put it on a piece of paper, like so. If you go to IKEA, you can get a roll of craft paper really cheap. Otherwise, printer stores have it, but it's not really cheap. But roll of craft paper, draw your thing, put your center line in, okay? So this young lady wanted it bigger, and so I actually had done it on tissue paper, and then I cut it. And I just went right down here, and I went cut, 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 cut. Spread it out as wide as she wanted it, and put it on another piece of paper. Now you'll notice, if you look closely down at the bottom, it's kind of got this zigzag, zigzag, zigzag. That's so that when I fold it, it has this nice little pleats, ends up back to this original shape. Okay? So what if you wanted to do it the other way? Say you want to do ruching on a piece, which ruching is that little crinkle, crinkle, crinkle all the way down. So I took the same piece, and what I do is fold it in half, fold it in half, fold it in half, fold it in half, and then cut them. And then I'm going to put that on another piece of paper, again matching that center line, and say make it twice as big. Twice as big will give you a nice gather all the way down. You can do this for every piece of your bodice. If you want that ruching effect, I don't have a picture of it. Her princess gown had ruching all the way on the top. Sorry, don't have it.
You see it a lot in prom dresses these days.
That whole wrinkle, 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 wrinkle effect. So what you'll do is you'll have one piece that's the original size. You'll have a second piece of the same fabric, or perhaps you'd like to have it a chiffon or an organza over the top, which if you guys, a chiffon is more stiff. Oh, please don't step on the train. That's fine. So a chiffon is real soft and flowy. Organza is a little more stiff. If you're going to do ruching, I recommend chiffon over organza, but you can use what you want. But you're going to need a solid piece underneath to sew it to, and then you'll take that bigger piece, wherever it was, take that bigger piece and crinkle it in. In this case, I didn't have to do that because she wanted this piece out of satin. And we weren't actually wrinkling it, we were pleating it. So you can do the same technique for either pleating or wrinkling. Any questions? No. Okay. So, skirts. So say for instance, you want to do again, back to a Lolita costume, because I keep thinking about how to make things bigger. Those have those really great, a lot of material to that skirt. All you have to do is take your pattern, pretend this is a skirt pattern, take your pattern, hold that. You're going to cut up, not quite, but almost all the way to the top, again and again and again, and then you're going to fan it out. And then if you don't have a French curve, which is a fancy ruler, you can take a piece of string and just get it to the angle that you want so that it makes sense. That it's going to go along the same edge all the way down, but you've now fanned it out and made it bigger. Fun thing with that pattern is if you take a regular straight skirt pattern and you add a panel like that here and here and here. We actually, a couple years ago, made watermelon dresses for watermelon thumb, and we added like little watermelon slices in there. We did the same thing for a Christmas dress, but we had a purpose. We were doing a watermelon parade, so.
I have a question.
Yes.
When you're expanding that pattern, how do you account for the extra fabric you're needing? Because now you're not meaning what it says.
You're exactly right. So her question is, when you're expanding a pattern like that, and you've read on your pattern that, hey, I need 5 yards of this, one thing I do is you definitely want to make sure that you stay with your grain line. If it tells you that you need to go this way on the grain, or that way on the grain, or this way on the grain, but you need to take that into fact. You're absolutely right. If you're adding a little bit extra to a bodice, and you're only adding it to one panel, you're probably okay with there, because they usually give you a little extra, but just to be sure, I would add a 1/4 yard to your yardage. If you're going to be adding a lot, for a skirt, for instance, to make a ball gown skirt, I take a minimum of 4 yards. And then, so if you think about, so a ball gown skirt with no sweep train, because this has a sweep train on it. You want to walk? I got it.
Okay.
I got it. It's going down.
So I'm just gonna walk up and down this aisle. Pardon the feet.
So this has got a sweep train. Here's an example of a gown. This was actually a Vogue pattern that we modified because she was the Duchess of the Fence of Little Flamingos. And so we wanted to give it a little flamingo flair. But this has got a sweep train on it. We actually added a little bit more because the person who designed this particular train wanted more of a train to it. This particular train down here wanted more of a train on this. Okay, so you do have to take that into account. So if I'm going to put a sweep train on it, I'm going to add another 3/4 of a yard to it. Simply because, and you have to keep in mind, is it 60-inch fabric or is it 45-inch fabric? When it is on a roll instead of a bolt, sometimes to me it's easier to tell from a roll from a bolt because it's just, is it this tall or is it this tall? Okay, very good question. Anybody else? Okay, awesome. Let's see, what am I trying to cover? Sorry, this is nerve-wracking. I forgot to put notes down, so you guys are kind of guinea pigs on this, but, okay. So, if you have, again, with this little board. So you can mix and match patterns, and then there are things you can do without a pattern. So my son there, a couple of years ago, wanted to be Aang, the last airbender. And so literally I took a pair of sweatpants, laid the sweatpants down on the ground, and gave it some margin of error because you can always take off.
Sparkle.
Okay, thank you, thank you. And then,
Go for it, yeah.
okay. And then this is an example of a Lolita costume where we had modified. Again, it just kind of, you should have brought you had that with you.
Yeah.
Oh, let's do Sophie. Okay, yeah. You talk about this.
So remember the colonist pattern that we're passing around? This is an example of a modified colonist pattern. So, who here's a fan of Howl's Moving Castle? All right, such a movie. Anyway, this is Sophie's dress. Unfortunately, I forgot the apron, but white aprons are fairly easy to come by. But if you look at the pattern for the colonist dress, and if you look at Sophie's design, she has a very, very similar look. However, she has
A seam
right before the
Right
top
after the
of
buttons, yeah.
Right after her buttons. This became a challenge because obviously you can't just put a seam onto places. We also wanted to try to mimic the different darts that she had
The pleats.
on the, sorry, my bad, pleats. This is nerve-wracking, gosh.
Yeah.
Anyway, we also wanted to try to mimic the different pleats on the side that her character design had. From here, did we just like...
So what we did in this case, we took the basic bodice pattern. You guys saw the little V thing. We put it all together in one piece.
I'm gonna walk this around.
That's fine, you can walk around. We put it together all in one piece for the whole bodice. It wasn't a real fitted gown, which was good because we didn't have to deal with the bodice sides. And then cut it, like she said, right there. And then made that bottom piece 2 inches wider. Because we wanted to be able to take and do those little pin tucks here and there to give it the Sophie look. And then when we cut it out, we had to remember to leave your 5/8 inch margin right where we had the seam, so we have some room to stitch. Make sense? So here's an example of a very easy modification of an existing pattern. Okay. Any more questions? Okay, so we were at our 15-minute mark, so we're going to move on to how to make an applique. I'm going to need you to hold the microphone.
Oh, I need to give that there.
Okay,
That's fine. Okay, and then you're going to have to pass things out.
Yep.
Okay, so I only have 40 kits. I love you all dearly. So if anyone, oh, thank you, Trevor. This would be voluntold child number 2. Okay, so, wait, don't go anywhere. Hold on. No. And actually this fabric, this yellow fabric, is what we made that Aang costume out of. It's just kind of fun. You're not gonna have enough hands. Okay, so again, I have a whole bunch of teeny tiny surgical scissors, suture scissors. Again, if you could please return them when we're done, so that I can have them for another class. So,
Was everyone?
and you will have to share. And this side, I'm sorry, you guys get to go first if there's, and I don't know that there'll be extras, but if there's anybody who doesn't want to make an applique, that's fine too. Every other person on the scissors, and I've got enough E6000 for every person to have it. Oh, these people up here. And then, Victoria, cut about yay for each person. I have one more. Oh, I think I probably have extra stars. Okay, so when a, yeah, enough for each person, yes, please. So when a person, a duchess from Lutheran Coronation or Order of the Alamo or any of them, when they select their train, it comes in a great big paper pattern, the size of the train. Well, first they select like a sketch and it's about yay big. But then they get a paper pattern. And the paper pattern is a reasonable facsimile of what their train's gonna look like. Their designer may come and tweak some of the art on it simply because when you're drawing it this big and then you blow it up 800%, it can distort. And so they may come out and tweak a few things. But what they do, it all starts pretty much the same, is we're going to pretend these are our paper patterns, because they are. You will have your piece of crinoline. Does everybody have a pen or a pencil or writing implement of some sort? If not, please find one and share with neighbors. Everybody having fun?
Yes.
Learning anything fun and interesting? Okay. That's the goal. Okay. I'm gonna let everyone get their stuff. But the basics is, you're gonna transfer this pattern to the crinoline. And the way you're gonna do that is you're gonna lay the piece of pattern down on the floor, you're gonna lay the crinoline on top of it, and you're gonna drop. If this were a multi-layered pattern, for example, if you're looking down here, the birds have their wings, then we would actually make it so that they would tab into each other, but this is just a single layer pattern. By the way, the birds have names. Do you want to know the birds' names?
Yes.
Okay, so on the flamingo train, from the top, we have Bird Reynolds, Audrey Hepburn, Lady Bird, oh no, sorry, this one's Larry Bird. Larry Bird, he's the tall one. Lady Bird, Whoopi Goldberg, and Bob. The bobbing flamingo. Okay, and then here we have Dawn and Dusk. George and Gracie. What, Victoria, what's the, I don't remember these two names.
Which one?
Trevor calls this one. Trevor, what do you call the bird of paradise? Altair.
That one's actually George.
That's George. This is okay. Tootie Tootie's a toucan. The eclectus is Gracie, and I don't remember the crane's name.
Let's just call him Crane.
Whatever. And the reason why we named the birds is because while we were working on them, we could say, you know, hey, I'm working on George's legs. Hey, do you have a two-piece body? You know, or whatever. So. And the interesting thing about these, so you'll see a lot of this is done with rhinestone. A lot of that one is done with sequins. The reason for that is when you're Dutch is mostly what you use is a sequins. When you make royalty, most of what you use is rhinestones. That used to be it because of the cost involved. However, rhinestone sourcing has come down so much that we're doing a lot more in rhinestones for everything. And for those of you who weren't here when I said it, this one weighs 32 pounds, and that one weighs 8.
Right.
Sequins it is.
Sequins it is, she says. And generally speaking, when you come up here, you'll take a look. Everything is done in silver sequins. There's a reason for that because then it's kind of like the black lines on a thing. If you were to do, in this case, dark navy sequins, it would make the design look smaller. And silver sequins reflect really nicely. Okay. Everybody? Almost everybody? Okay, so those of you who already have your thing, already have your star. Oh, shoot, we're missing one thing. Victoria? Oh, right there. Hold on just a moment. Somewhere is the bag full of cardboard. This is the bag full of cardboard. Okay, so everybody, we really love these people, the Hyatt. We don't want them to be pissed off with us. So, this is your work surface. Take one and pass it around. And everybody please take about 8 straight pins. Try not to take more than 8 because I won't have enough. Okay, so if you didn't hear that, everyone please take a piece of cardboard who's going to be working on one of these, and about 8 straight pins. So, thank you. So go ahead and take your piece of fabric. Pretend this is my piece of fabric. You're going to put your piece of fabric first, and you're going to, this doesn't have a right side or a wrong side on that. If you had fabric that had a right side or a wrong side, you would put the right side down. This is going to sound a little counterintuitive, but this is, trust me. So then you're going to put your pattern, I'm going to borrow yours real quick. You're going to put your pattern on top like this. Okay? Do yourself a favor and just pop 1 or 2 straight pins just to keep everything from, whoops, I just tossed a straight pin, from moving around. So you're going to do this. Okay? All right. Now, sorry, you become my guinea pig here. This is what you get for sitting in the front row. Okay, so now everybody take their E6000. I want to take a moment to talk about adhesives. Do not use hot glue, ever. Did I say that loud enough? Okay, so, okay, I take that back. You can use hot glue, but not for this. First of all, you can damage your fabric. Second of all, it won't stick. It becomes hard, and for certain things, I'm sure that it would work lovely, not for this. Some of the other things that we do use, other than E6000, because E6000, as some of you may know, does not work on acrylic stones. If you were to try to attach acrylic rhinestones with E6000, they melt. And then you kind of get like a crackle look to them, and you don't get the look you want. However, if you are attaching crystal or glass rhinestones, you can use it. And in fact, many of the splash water that you'll look on her, they are attached with E6000. Other things we use are fabric tack. The difference between fabric tack and E6000, E6000 has a really strong odor. If you are sensitive to glue odors, don't use E6000, or use it in a well-ventilated room. Fabric tack is a little bit more cost-effective, and a little more forgiving in the fact that you can reseal it and use it again and again. E6000 you can, but it tends to dry out over time. Your tube of E6000. Tacky glue. The thing about tacky glue is it takes longer to dry, and since it's kind of a water-based-ish thing, it can stretch some of your fabrics and it can mark some of your fabrics. Another thing about E6000, they now come in 3 colors: white, black, and clear. If you want to do something that is not black, do not use black, because black will bleed everywhere. And then the super secret glue. Oh, we have more glue? Okay, you can spread about.
Who doesn't have glue?
Raise your hand. Okay, everybody's got glue?
Be all right on blue.
Okay, all right.
Then I had extra, awesome. Oh,
Awesome.
Pins. Are the pins coming back or are we out?
I have a Sharpie.
Pins, not that.
Sure.
Pins. Are we out of pins? They're still passing them out. Okay, we're still working on pins. Okay, they're coming your way. So the adhesive that people don't think about, clear silicone bathtub caulk. And no, I'm not kidding. So we get these syringes that you can get at your dentist office that have like a hook on them that are clear. You can get them on Amazon. I just talk to my dentist and he gives me one whenever I need one. We fill those full of your DAP clear silicone bathtub caulk and use that. It takes a little longer to dry, but it's flexible, it's washable, and we use that a lot as an adhesive. And it's cheap, it's real cheap. Okay, so hopefully the pins are getting back there. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your little tube of E6000 and very gently take out the lid and pop the little thing, I'll let you do it, but pop the little seal on it. Thank you, I'm working on it. Are we out of time now?
You started a little early.
Good. Okay, that's all right, because this takes a little bit longer. Okay, so now you're going to very gently try to stay on the line, not do a ton of glue, but try to gently follow the line and go around your star.
Some of you are very strong. Do not squeeze the glue too hard. It will
keep
explode.
going, it will keep coming out. So that's the other thing, be gentle with your E6000 and also please make sure that when you're not using it, put the cap on it and make sure that it's resting on one of the cardboard strips because we don't want to damage any of their stuff. What?
Has a bad habit of continuing to come out after you've stopped squeezing. Just because you're not squeezing doesn't mean it's not coming out.
Very good point. Okay, so those are things to think about. Once you have gone all the way around your star, you get to get messy. Take your little finger and gently rub the glue and try to push it through the mesh. Okay? She lets him do that part.
Anyone that has a million different cardboard things they've been cards they've been handed out throughout the course of this event is also an excellent use for those random things you've been handed.
Now you tell me.
Now you tell me. Okay, so the goal here is to try to push that through the fabric. So this is why you're kind of doing it backwards. It's kind of counterintuitive. So we're gonna let that dry for just a second. And the nice thing about E6000 is it dries relatively quickly.
Oh, I have something.
Oh, you have something?
Yeah.
So sometimes the E6000 doesn't want to go to. Wait, you already told them to press it?
Yeah, don't push.
Oh, never mind. Question?
Like, what's the sandwich like? Okay, like.
Okay, she's gonna come back to help. So the goal here is that you're basically trying, and this is why we use that as wide of a crinoline as you can find. There are some real tight weave ones. It's better to have this one that you can kind of sort of see through. So all of the appliques on this train are made exactly that process, right?
They Sharpie onto the, just to confirm, Sharpie onto the thing. That's what I thought.
So we often use a Sharpie because in this case it doesn't matter because the star is the same whether it's front or back. If you use a Sharpie, then you can see the design from the other way and you would flip it over so that if you have something that's specific that needs to go on the left or the right. So just keep that in mind. If you don't have a Sharpie, you can always do it. Just try to transfer, take it to a window and transfer it. No, that's the only pen I had. Sorry. People can share pens. I promise. It's okay. Okay. All right.
Pens is what
Oh, that one.
Writing implement or pokey pens?
writing it.
No, I don't have writing. Oh, please. Oh. Yes, they have extra. Well, no, you're going to need the pokey instruments in just a moment. Yes, sir.
I have a question about the glue.
Uh-huh.
You said that the fabric tack is less strung out, it's cheaper and can be reused.
Yes, not reused, but the glue can't be reused, but the bottle is resealable pretty easily.
Yeah.
If you want, take a sniff of this versus the E6000 and you'll see what I mean. Although this one,
This type of snip.
yes, we're not encouraging anyone to sniff Kool-Aid.
But my question was,
Huh.
if that one's better in every way, why use the E6000?
So the E6000 is stronger. Very good point. His question is if I like fabric tack better, why not use it for everything? E6000 is a stronger hold. So if I'm going to attach, for instance, on the trains, if I am going to attach rhinestones without holes in them, or if it's something that I've run short of time and I'm not going to have time to sew down, then I'm going to use E6000 because it's stronger. If it's something that I'm going to go back and whip stitch, then I'm going to use fabric tack. Yes.
What was it that you said you apply the caulk with?
Apply the what with? The caulk with? Okay, I use a syringe that I get at my dentist office that doesn't have a needle in it, and it's got a plastic tube on the front.
It's a curved tip syringe.
Thank you, curved tip syringe. And what's nice about that is you can stick a straight pin in it to seal it up and use it again and again and again and again and again. And quite frankly, you can even clean this, let the silicone dry, clean it out, and reuse the syringe again. So it's a practicality thing. But again, if I'm going to use silicone on something, I'm going to come back and stitch it down. Okay? All right, so let me feel yours real quick. Okay, it's reasonably dry. If you feel your E6000 and it seems reasonably dry, take your little teeny tiny scissors. I have a few more, I think. I have a few more teeny tiny scissors. Teeny tiny scissors, may need to share with your neighbor, but go ahead and cut those. There you go, honey. Cut that star out.
Do we want the line still on it? Or?
Cut right on the line. Okay? Yeah, so you'll notice if you look at some of the three-dimensional flowers, they're whip stitched. This has actually got 2 layers of fabric to get it a different color. You can do that by, after you do the first layer, you do a second layer with the E6000 or silicone and then cut it out. To do it with a back, what I would do is after I cut it out, I would put a tiny little bead of glue all the way around the edge and lay it on a piece of fabric. And that's how you do the 2-sided ones. So the cool thing about this, do we have any school teachers out here? No? Yes? No? Maybe? Okay. This is an appropriate use of geometry. You never thought you were going to use geometry again in your life, but that's what all this is. all this pattern modification and such. Yes? With a pair of scissors? Do you not have a pair of scissors?
Yes.
Okay, so you can go ahead and cut it out. You've already got, is it dry-ish? You've already glued it down? Okay, cut it out. And you should have something that resembles a star. Yay. Okay, so now we're gonna do the sequence. Okay, so, sorry, I'm stealing all your stuff. What's your name?
Sarah.
Hi, Sarah. Everybody, this is Sarah. Hi, Sarah. I keep stealing all Sarah's stuff. This is where she gets her sitting in the front row. Now you know why nobody wanted us up here. Just kidding. So now you're going to take your star, and you're going to just do one leg of your star with your glue, and I recommend that you put the sequin beginning on an inside point of the star instead of the outside point, okay? And you're gonna go just initially from here to here. And you're gonna put a straight pin here at the very beginning to hold the sequence down. And you're gonna put a straight pin at your point, and you're gonna wrap it around, do another little glue here, 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 and you're gonna put straight pin, straight pin, straight pin, straight pin. You're gonna run out eventually, but then you can start pulling them. Just don't pull out the very first one yet. You can pull out the second one if you run out of pins and you need pins. Okay? Oh, that's, you can use this one, sorry. I'm trying to hand off my glue. This works too. And the reason why we're not using fabric tack today and we're using E6000 is because I could get teeny tiny tubes of E6000 and I couldn't get teeny tiny tubes of fabric tack. Little tiny line. You don't need a lot. In this case, less is more. Now, if you wanted to, and what we would normally do in coronation is after we have sequined them and it has dried, we'll go back and whip stitch them. And just go around the edges of the sequins and catch that thread that's underneath it. There are some people who actually come up and put a seed bead inside every sequin because they seem to think it looks like rhinestones. I don't have that opinion, but they do that, and it's beautiful. The whole point of doing the whip stitching, or if you look on this train, it has a seed bead about every third or fourth, and that was just to hold it down. And then I had a friend of mine who did order the Alamo trains ask me why I was bothering to put the bead on when you didn't really need to do that. You just needed to catch the thread, and so I had an aha moment.
Could you repeat what you said when we have the star?
I'm sorry, what?
Could you repeat what you said?
Yeah. Okay, so when you have the star done, we're going to take our piece of sequin, and you're going to start with the glue on the inside of a peak. Thank you, I'm going to borrow this. The inside of a peak, pretend this is like the other end of the star. So start here, and then just glue out to a point, and you're going to put a little row of sequins. And basically you're gluing the sequins all the way around the star. It's just how to start it. Like this, thank you. So like this. And then you're just gonna keep working your way around with the glue. And I know you can't see this in the back, but she has little pin here, and here, and here. So she has a pin at each peak. When she gets further around and she runs out of little straight pins, now if you happen to have, I guess it was 10 straight pins. If you happen to have 10 straight pins, then great, you'll make it all the way around. But otherwise, she'll take this second straight pin and move it, because at this point it's kind of, sort of in better shape. And when you get all the way around to the end, you're going to take out your first straight pin, glue it down, and stick your first straight pin back down so that it matches up nice and pretty. Okay, so the cool things that you can do with these is, we were talking about Steven Universe, how he has his star here. I did the red and yellow because he wears a red shirt and I happen to have red sequins. Okay, sometimes he wears a blue shirt. Again, you gotta forgive me, I've actually never seen an episode. But, okay, but I'm getting ghastly looks over here. My daughter did an amazing curl costume 2 years in a row, just saying. And speaking of not using the proper adhesive when we were supposed to, so last year,
Actually, can I tell this story?
okay, she'll tell this story, it's sad.
So who knows not to use rubber cement on your face? So, me being the unknowledgeable cosplayer I thought, well, I need something that is rubbery in texture, that is very, very easy to apply to my face. First thing I thought, rubber cement. Now, can you imagine, probably whenever things start to burn, you kind of think, oh geez, maybe I should take this off. Yeah, that thought process didn't happen. So here I am, laying down, trying to get this pearl on my forehead to dry, just kind of there. Ah, wow, okay, let's hope this gets over with. This pain continues throughout the day. Finally, by the end of the day, my headache from the rubber cement is so strong I just give up. Go back to my hotel room and I take off what I thought was just my pearl. Turns out there was some on my face too. Not only that, but it wasn't a regular pearl. It was a pendant that I had painted to look like a pearl. So now I'm left with a perfect oval burn on my forehead. Might I add, I might not look like it, but I'm a sorority girl as well. We had recruitment that same week.
I forgot about that part.
So here I am going to school with an oval on my forehead. Obviously, my haircut shows my forehead, and having to answer a lot of questions. Moral of the story, don't use rubber cement on your face or any part of your body. Oh yeah, another thing. Burn treatment doesn't work with chemical burns.
Okay, so there's a very humorous story of when not to use the wrong adhesive. I told you we made every mistake in the book. Yes, ma'am. Sir, sorry.
What would be a good adhesive to use on?
Oh, she has an answer to that. Other than spirit gum.
Spirit gum works too.
No, not spirit gum, that hardens enough.
Okay.
So, yesterday I cosplayed Pearl. Obviously, I don't have a oval on my forehead. The answer was a lot simpler than I thought it was. And that's actually a lot of the time. I always think of the more complex answer and it ended up working very, very horribly. The answer to your question was eyelash glue.
Eyelash glue. Yeah.
Eyelash glue dries clear and it doesn't burn an oval in your forehead.
See, you can laugh at our expense, or her expense.
Hey, what?
I'm just glad it didn't scar.
Oh, yeah.
She would look like a unicorn with her horn broke off.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
Okay, so she is at the point where she is ready to snip off the length, okay? So, yay. Okay, so what we're gonna do here is, I usually try to leave 2 sequins because they always fall off. So snip like 2 sequins down from the end.
I don't have the dexterity or the intent, like, to do this.
Okay. And then actually they're gonna let this dry the rest of the way, and after it has dried all the way, then you can snip off this last little chunk. So leave a little tail. Okay, so when you guys come up and take a look at these trains, there are a couple things I want you to notice. So in the splashes of the flamingos, there are a couple different techniques used. There are some of them that are sewn down beads in rows, but there are some of them that are moundy. The way you get that effect is you take E6000 in this case, because it is strong, and you put the bead of that in there. You first would sequin this. I'm going to borrow your star again. You would first sequin it like this. You would whip stitch your sequins down, and then you would fill the entire inside with E6000, and then sprinkle beads and gently tap them in. This will give you a nice moundy 3D effect. And it's simple, it's quick, it doesn't take any time at all. Another thing you can do if you want to embellish something, I don't have an example of this, but if you want to, if you notice on royal capes, they've got almost a dimensional look to their monograms. So what they do is they take a piece of satin cording and they glue that down or stitch it down first, and then they bead over it. And that's how you get that three-dimensional effect. You can also do what's called stacks. If you look on the cattails, there's an example of what a stack is, and that's where you take more than one bead and you stack it up, and you'll use different shapes of beads. Or, I think what other techniques do we have on beading? Let's see what I've got examples of here. Oh, so if you look on the two birds here, we'll call them, I think we call them dusk and dawn. The beads are all nice and in the rows. Here's the secret, I did not sew those on, they are glued on. Even the beads. So what you do if you're going to do that, leave the beads on the string if they come strung. If they don't come strung, string them on a straight pin to get them exactly where you want them. You can use silicone caulk for this. Put a row of silicone caulk, lay your beads, scooch them up with the tweezers or with the edge of your scissors, and move on. Glued on beads actually work really well. Something we didn't really know much about when we were making this train, because if you'll notice I didn't do it on the leaves, and we've actually lost a couple sections of beads on these bottom leaves. Okay. Does anybody have any questions? Are we having fun?
Yes.
Are we learning things?
Yes.
Has this been worth your time?
Yes.
Okay.
So I do have something I always like to say whenever something doesn't necessarily go right. Obviously, whenever you're working around sharp objects, needless to say, eventually you will prick yourself or accidentally cut yourself or anything like that. Don't bleed on anything, but if you do, you can legitimately say you put your blood, sweat, and tears into your item.
One more thing I want to say, when you are working with E6000, fabric tack, or caulk, and you accidentally get a glob of glue where you don't want it,
Every time.
do not touch it. Right.
That happened here
Okay.
somewhere.
Okay, leave it. So do not touch it. I know everybody's inclination is to try to wipe it. That will make it 100 times worse. Do not touch it. Let it dry. And then take a credit card and scrape it. If you need to, you can also take an iron and try to, once you've gotten the majority of it up. But everybody's inclination is like, oh! Don't do it. If you can avoid doing that, you'll be able to rescue your product. You may still have a little residue, but it won't be nearly as bad as having a smear. Okay. All right, what's our time? 5:02? Okay, I am beyond time. Okay, so does anybody have any other questions, concerns, happy thoughts? Okay, so 1 second. We're not making these ones 3D. She was asking if she then pinched it to make it 3D. Actually, so this is what the finished project. My whole star pupil down here, Sarah, she's just awesome. This is what your finished product. If you wanted to then attach this to something, you can then use E6000 or silicone caulk or whatever to attach it. If you want to make it more permanent, then also tack it, whip stitch it. Okay? And I hope you guys can make things sparkle. Okay, thank you. We're happy to stay for a few minutes to answer any questions. I do not think there's another panel in this room. I will double check with the double check real quick with the young lady outside. I think this is the last panel.
No.
Okay, so I think this is the last panel in this room, so take as much time as you'd like. Come out and take a look at these. If you could try to avoid not stepping on them, that would be grand. Thank you.